Dice. I have a camera bag. This is an old Canon camera bag that I use to store my dice collection, which is a little big. Uh-oh. My die in a die broke. Looks like it's time to thin the herd out a little bit. There's probably... This used to be one of these. I don't know what happened to it, other than it broke. Hey, today we're talking about dice, and like all good gamers, I have a fairly substantial collection. Not as big as most people, not as big as it used to be. It used to be a lot bigger, but I realized that I was carrying a lot of dead weight, so I thinned out the herd, so to speak. And to that end, we're going to talk a little bit too much about dice today. We're going to talk about the fact that they have two primary purposes. Before we get into that, let me just show you my kind of gamer box. This has the stuff that I typically use. For those of you who have been curious, where do I get these from? I ordered a batch of like, I don't know, there's like you get 100 of these little chips. They stack nicely. They got the grooves, so they stay together. Different, I've got a couple of pipe cleaners. The chips, the little gems I bought, you know, this is an impulse buy at the local game shop. And then I've got a couple of cloud markers. I don't think I've used those. And just my hidden markers with numbers and, you know, various... Here's a scatter die, right? Various stuff. So I've got one box that I use that contains all that. My golf ball size D20. I also have a full set of Xochi dice. And these are what I wanted to show you first. We're going to start with these. These are the primo top of the line. And you can tell that they're good because Xochi has been doing this for 30 years. In fact, I think the original D&D dice came from Xochi. Mostly Platonic solids, not the D10s. The D10s here are, well, so a Platonic solid has all of the shapes, all of the sides, all of the facets are the same size and shape. So your D20, your D6s, these D10s are not. Now the original Xochi dice, the original D&D dice had a D20. Well, but the D20, 20 sides, was marked 0 to 9, I guess, or 1 to 0 twice. And you would get a D20 by rolling it, and if you got and you'd also roll a second die to determine whether or not you add 10. On a 1, 2, 3, we'll add 10 to the result. Well, look, 6 plus 10 is 16. And if you get a 4, 5, 6, then this is a 6. So you get the same spread. Statistically, it's no different from rolling a D20. When you manufacture a die, you have to consider the cost of manufacturing. And there are certain corners that you can cut, that will make a difference in how accurate the die is. Now, the Xochi dice, notice this D20 is marked from 1 to 20, okay? And so is this one. But notice that the Xochi die, if I turn it to gleam in the light, it's got nice, clean, crisp, sharp edges. The materials used, the manufacturing process, the quality assurance on this Xochi die ensures that you get an even distribution, at least as even as humanly possible. On some of these other dice, and this one in particular, they don't put nearly as much time, effort, and money, not as much blood, sweat, and tears, in ensuring that when you roll this die, you get an even spread, that you have an same chance of rolling a 1 as you do rolling a 20. And in this case, there's a little logo on it. We're going to talk about this in a minute because, and again, this is the gold standard, right? Xochi, a lot of effort goes into ensuring. Now, there's one other thing that you can do, aside from just ensuring that the weight is evenly distributed, that each facet is the exact same size. There's another little trick you can do, and we'll talk about that in a second. When we look at a die like this, you've got rounded corners, which makes it a little more robust. It doesn't wear down as much, but I like this one because it's big. I like it because it shows up well on camera. But there are little micro differences in the weight distribution. If we talk about an outfit like Las Vegas, or I don't know, what's one of the Indian reservations where the casinos, or what's the one in Europe down there in the south of France, or just south of France. Anyway, point is, a casino really wants to ensure that their D6 is evenly distributed. Let's take a look here. The weight is going to be a little bit off, right? Because look, we drilled out 6 divots on this side, and we drilled out 1 divot on this side. So this side is going to be just a tiny bit heavier. And statistically, for our purposes, we're playing with toy soldiers, it's not that big a difference. But if you are in Las Vegas and you have 300 craps tables, and each of those craps tables, the dice are getting rolled 10,000 times a night, that's 300,000 times a night. Over the course of a year, you're talking about millions of dice rolls. And that little bit of weight that tips the scale just a little bit more towards the 1, over the course of a year, that can affect it. These are statistics that suddenly, oh, you know what? Instead of it being a true 1 in 6 chance. It's actually a 1 in 5.999999999 chance. And that means that, oh, my casino is going to lose out on $3 million over the course of our billion-dollar year. Now, $3 million is a lot of money to us. We're war gamers. It's not a lot to them, but it's actually a lot of money to anybody. So they spend a lot of money ensuring that the dice are evenly weighted, that when you cook the die, when you cut it, that it is that the plastic doesn't settle down to one side or the other. Even going to the extent that they don't drill divots out of their dice. I wish I had a couple of genuine craps dice here to show you. They use little stickers. They are perfectly flat along the top. And then they make those stickers as thin as possible. I think it's actually a little bit of paint, so that the weight of the paint won't draw the 6 down when the die is rolled, over the course of a year, an extra 100,000 times. Why am I talking about this? Well, there are 2 different reasons that you might use a die. Everything that we've talked about in this video so far, we have discussed dice as a random number generator. Every time I roll this die, I want to have an equal probability of rolling a 1 or a 2 or a 3 and so on up to 20. And every little bit of additional weight that draws one side down over another leads to the die being influenced. It's going to be weighted or loaded towards one particular number. In the case of our Xochi dice, what they do to minimize that impact, oh, guess who was painting today? I still have a little bit of paint on my finger. One of the things they do to minimize that impact is take a look. If we look at the 20, look at the 3 adjacent numbers that share a side, 2, 3, and 10. And if we look at the vertices, it's 13, 12, 9, 14. So you have a pretty even distribution around the 20. You might roll high, you might roll somewhere in the middle. Now let's look at the 1. And on the 1, we've got 11, 19, 18. So if, by some chance, our 20 side is a little bit heavier, so over the course of a million rolls, it's more likely to come to a stop on the 20. Well, we've got 2 rather high numbers and a medium number that maybe when it's heavily weighted on that side, it lands on the 18 or the 19 or the 11. So even in this area, even if we are weighted a little bit on the 20 side, we get a fairly even distribution. So we've bumped up the chances of either getting a 1, 19, 18, or 11. That minimizes the kind of spread. We want a nice, unlike when we roll 2d6, and you get that nice this bell curve. Very low chance of a 2, high chance of a 7, very low chance of an 11. We want a nice straight line, straight across, equal chance of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what this does is it weights our average result towards the center. All right, but what about this die over here? This is not used for generating random numbers. This is a status marker die, and it's numbered slightly differently. Here's our old pal, Thundar the Barbarian. And when we play Rangers of Shadowdeep, that's what it's called, he has 19 hit points. Now, if he's at full health, I don't put this die down. I don't need to. But if he takes 1 hit point of damage, I want to be able to turn from the 19 to the 18 as quickly as possible. Oh, look, there's 18 right next door. Oh, and there's 17 and 16. What this does, and then again, the little weird symbol is a 20. What this does, it's called a spin down die. And at this point, I should pause and I should thank Red Mage 101 is the guy that asked. He was a little shocked and appalled. Why are you using the spin down die? Don't you know that the spin down die lacks the random number generator die? And we're just going to call this the random die. Because all of our faces, if we turn it, look, all of our high faces are right next to each other. In this case, if our 20 is a little bit weighted, so it'll be this side of our D20, that means we're going to be more likely to turn up these faces, which are 1, 2, 5, right, 8. So a little bit of spread, but this is definitely weighted towards the lower end of the value spectrum. If our one side is a little bit heavier, it's going to come up with higher numbers more often. For the purposes of our game, might not be that big a deal. I'm only going to roll this 30 times in a game. Over the course of a year, I may roll it a couple of 100 times. If I get 1 extra critical hit over the course of a year, what do I care? And it's more likely that that happens because a die like this, a spin down die, is not going to be manufactured to the same exact specifications of a random number die. The guys making this No, we're using it as a counter. They are not going to invest the same amount of time and money and effort, blood, sweat, and tears that old Blue Xochi did. They know it's a counter. Why would they bother? It's a waste of time. You'd have to be an idiot to use this die to generate random numbers. And Red Mage kindly pointed this out and walked me through it. Stuff that I'd heard here and there elsewhere. And even the guy at the store said, hey, that's a spin down die. Is that going to be a problem? And I said, no, it's not going to be a problem. Now, having said that, I admit we're kind of way out in the weeds here. We're way out on a ledge here. We're getting real deep into our gaming thoughts. What can I say? I'm influenced by Rule of Carnage. They think about all of these things in great detail. This is an intellectual pursuit. If you're not interested in pursuing it intellectually, maybe go watch the D&D channels, okay? Now, why? That raises the obvious question. If you'd have to be an idiot to use spin down dice as random number generators, why would I, a genius level IQ guy, use these dice? Well, just because you're smart, that doesn't mean you're not an idiot. And just because there are a lot of reasons not to use these spin down dice does not mean that there aren't some reasons to use them. And let me start with the most obvious. I showed you this is my little kit. I showed you this. I can't remember if I showed you in this cut or not. It's got all of my accoutrements. The first thing is cost. I got these for $1 a piece. These come with Magic the Gathering like starter sets or something. And when people buy those starter sets, if they've already got one, you don't need more than any other. So they throw them all in a big bucket right there at the counter, and they say, hey, while you're here, if you need one, it's only $1. If you forgot yours, it's only $1. I said, oh, you know what I want? I want 2 match sets. I want red and I want blue. And I like these dice because they are very brilliant. The red in particular shows up really well on camera. And this is where I begin to diverge from the true hobby enthusiast, because my hobby is, granted, it does owe something to the games, but I also have that added level of complexity that I have to think about how things look on camera. And I really needed 2 sets of dice that look good on camera and that read good on camera, or read well on camera, I guess would be more appropriate. Okay, so for just $10, I've got 5 blue and 5 red dice. But why am I using the spin dice, I hear you ask? And the reason for that comes from this book right here. Fistful of Lead, Bigger Battles, or Galactic Heroes, or straight up Fistful of Lead. This is a D10 system. Well, I've got D10s here. Remember that you can use a D10 and a D6 as a D20. We showed this before. On a 1, 2, or 3, we add 10 to the result. Hey, look, I don't add 10. This is a 7. If this came up, I got a 50-50 chance of adding 10. Oh, there's a 17. You can go the other way. And this is where it becomes relevant. And this is where we bring out our bandito. We're going to have a little fight between our 2 dudes. And I'm going to roll 2 dice for the hero and 1 die for the villain. And oh, look, I've got a blue die for the guy in the blue coat. See how well that reads? See how easy it is to remember which die belongs to which model? When you're worried about lighting and camera, or even if you're just playing against some friends, I'm going to roll these. And if the value of the die comes up above 10, because our game is a D10 system, I'm going to subtract 10. So this 12 would really be a 2. We'll roll our dice, and we're about to move our mice. Now, I have 3 dice, and I have multiple modifiers that I'm going to add to each of those results, depending on what we're doing. If we're shooting, I'm at -1, but it's large, so that's +1, but it's aim fire, so that's +1, and it's -1 because +1 because it's artillery shooting at a close. Okay, I got a lot of modifiers here, okay? So now I'm juggling a whole lot of numbers. I got to juggle the number of dice, plus this guy has a total of +2 to his dice, and then this guy has a total of -2. And so in order to keep the math simple, what I will do is say, look, my hero rolled a 9, and he's at a total of +2. So that makes this die an 11. And did you see how I had to find the 11? Likewise with the 18. Or if I rolled let's say we rolled a 2, and now I have to add 2 to this die roll. Hey, look, the 4 is right there. Had I rolled my Xochi dice and I got the 2, where's the 4? Is it right next door? No, now I need to fumble around. And I know this doesn't seem like much. Where's the 4? There it is. There's the 4. But that 4 or 5 seconds, all right, so let me finish the thought here. So I rolled a 2, and I need the 4. Okay, now I have 4. Now I can stop thinking about my modifiers for this figure. Now I can move over to the modifiers for this figure. I know he's at -1. Look, -1 is right there. Now, I don't have to think about the math at all. I've turned the faces of my dice to the actual value that I rolled. As long as that value is positive, I'm ready to go. And now I can compare. Oh, I got an 11 versus a 6. It minimizes the amount of numbers that I have to maintain in my head at the same time. And more importantly, because I'm not fumbling around going, oh, it's a 4, but I got to add 2, so where's the 6 on this die? I know this 3 to 4 seconds where I'm looking for the 6, and frankly, I'm getting up in years, right? Oh, that's the 9. So my eyes aren't really as good. That only took 3 or 4 seconds. If you and I are sitting across a table, that 3 or 4 seconds is no big deal. But over the course of a video where I'm rolling these dice 70, 80 times, suddenly those 3 to 4 seconds adds up to 4 to 5 minutes of the video. And rather than having to edit out those 4 to 5 minutes, it's way easier for me to simply use spin down dice that I can deal with one guy at a time, set the dice, and now I have a much easier comparison. Also, I'm gaming solo. The only person I'm cheating by using a die that is loaded is myself. And fundamentally, when I play these games, I am far less concerned with who is going to be the winner, because I always win. That's the secret. I'm playing both sides. I never lose. But one of the purposes of the channel is to demonstrate the rules of the game and how the game works. And having dice that are wildly balanced in one direction or another doesn't change the rules of the game. In fact, it may be better for us to use dice that are streaky, that are likely to show wild swings of high versus low, because we can illustrate what happens. We have more opportunities to show what a critical hit does, what a critical miss does. We have wild swings where we can show exactly how bad things get when you're using a D20, as in the case of Rangers of Shadowdeep, or even a D10 where you've got these big spreads. We want that to happen. That's not a problem for us. The other thing we do to minimize that, now if I only had these 2 dice, and I rolled these 2 dice every time I needed to roll a D20, I would have 50, 60, 100 die rolls in a given video. Over the course of the year, we'd have several thousand die rolls. We would begin to notice that this red die is streaky and it runs hot, or this blue die runs cold. But I don't have one die. The other variable that I add to the mix to ensure that I'm not unfairly weighting my red teams over my blue teams is that I've got 5 dice. And this is part of the reason that I bought 5 dice. This is part of the reason I showed you how I set them into my tray. I just throw them in at random. So if one of these dice is streaky hot and one is streaky cold, I don't know which one it is. I'm going to have to track each of these dice individually to make that determination. In other words, for my purposes, these dice are just random enough to be used in my games. I know if I was playing against an opponent across the table, or if I was playing for money, I would be a lot more concerned about the average weighting distribution of these dice. I'm not. I'm interested in visibility, and I'm interested in the speed of finding the number that I'm looking for. It is also worth pointing out that usually our variables, our modifiers to the dice, are not going to be in the 5, 6, 7, 8 range. They're typically going to be, when we're adjusting these dice, they're going to be in the 1, 2, or 3 range. This gets even more complicated when we throw an extra figure in there. Let's throw another French Revolutionary in there. Hey, look, our bad guy is getting teamed up on. All right, so now I may need to bring in a different color die, or I just designate. Well, here, now I've got 3 sides. They're all rolling dice. So that adds another number that I have to track. Oh, look, it's a 10, but he's got an assistant, so he's going to be at an 11. See how fast that is? This is why I use spin dice on the channel. The next question is, are spin dice or random number generating dice right for you? And I can't tell you the answer to that question. All I can tell you is that it's worth sitting down and taking a little bit of time to go through this thought exercise to understand what tools you're using. Are these the right tools for the job? If you're playing in a role-playing game campaign with friends around a table, these are probably not the right tools. These are much better tools. They'll give you a much more even spread. But if you are the kind of lunatic that is obsessive about these games and has a YouTube channel and he wants to show people how games work, then maybe spin down dice are right for you. And if a few, like, over-the-top eggheads get bothered by that, you know, just remember, it's just a game. I should really just relax. I know you guys know that reference because you're gamers. You know, we're all in those same circles. The last thing I want to say before we cut out for the day is I know this is a deep dive into a, you know, sometimes discussed. I don't want to say seldom. I'm not taking any polls here. But this is a deep dive into a fairly, like, some people turned the video off like 18 minutes ago, and I get that. And if you're one of those people that turn the video off, leave a comment. Let me know, do you like this kind of deep dive into some pretty esoteric, you know, statistics and number game stuff? If you do, and I'm genuinely saying this not because I need you to work the algorithm. I don't really care about the algorithm. What I want to do is bring you the best product, and I want to keep things interesting and light and maybe move away from playing quite so many tabletop games and do a little bit more of this analysis. So if you'd like to see more of that, you know, let me know either with an attaboy or, you know, anywhere. You guys know how to find me over on the social media. We're done. I'm praying for you.